Let's go on to the dog-bone asteroid. Cleopatra is one of the larger M-class asteroids of metallic characteristics. Also has the largest amplitude of any main belt asteroid, showing that it must be very elongated. See, this was our state of knowledge back in the 70s. Hence, there's been great interest in observing occultations since the modern era of asteroidal occultations began in 1975. In 1977, based mainly on Paul Maley's observation of a secondary occultation of a third magnitude star by 6 Hebe over 900 kilometers north of Mexico City, where the main event was observed, but he had this very clear half-second occultation, whereas the people at the main event had, like almost 10-second occultation in Mexico City. And here was a naked eye star, and so it was very, very clear. So we started claiming at that time that minor planets might have satellites. Oh, everyone did. Yeah, most astronomers, it was an outlandish idea, convinced that relatively small asteroids just can't have satellites. But, yes.
And I could have confirmed it if I could have got set up in observing, but I didn't.
Right. Right. Yeah. So anyway, but Tom Van Flandern did some calculations and showed that there should be stable orbits exist around asteroids up to about 100 diameters, and that's just the Hill radius calculation. Oh no, he died in 2009. So. Although some planetary astronomers were persuaded that maybe such objects could exist, the fact that virtually all amateur observations that were then visual made most astronomers doubt what we were claiming. To counter the skeptics, IOTA encouraged observations from pairs of stations along the same chord, but separated by at least 100 meters for independent confirmation. So we started doing that even though we were losing numbers of chords across the asteroid in the process, but we wanted to be sure if we got a secondary event we could do that. So this just shows in 1980 we did that quite a bit, and this shows one asteroid where we had several chords, but we paired up and we would have had more chords, but of course there were prediction errors in those days, and so we got half of that asteroid. But these shows there were 3 good asteroids in the fall of 1980, but the one of interest is the one with Cleopatra, and Clemla had a prediction of the path here, and depending whether it was an SAO or an AGK3 catalog, we had 2 different paths, but we knew that the Pacific Northwest was the area of main interest. However, Gordon Taylor calculated a path that went over Northern California based upon some other last-minute astrometry, and so we alerted people in the Bay Area and to try to also make observations. Anyway, an account of this occultation was published in Occultation Newsletter, Volume 2, pages 140 to 141. So I show those in 4 separate slides here. So we knew that this Cleopatra occultation of an 8th magnitude star would occur near a minimum of the light curve, and so we knew it would be end-on to us, so it would be least interesting orientation. But nevertheless, the event was well observed. Next slide. So this is about the Cleopatra event. There was information, well, it just goes on. This is just talking about the predictions and so forth, and mentioning there's another event in November that wasn't observed, though, because it was down in South America and didn't have many observers there. But just talking about the astrometry. Next slide. So we tried to get observers across the path and so forth, and got the California people to observe. But Clemla's prediction turned out to be the best. This shows the observations of the across the asteroid here, and some of them were photoelectric observers. I have a better plot showing the fit to the current shape model. Of course, at those days, we just fit an ellipse to it as the best we could do. Um, but the interesting thing was the people in Southern or in Northern California um, also got an occultation. Just a pair of observers who went east of be sure to get out of the fog. They went just over the mountains east of San Jose, and they did observe a short occultation. Um, at Loma Prieta, it was Jerry Ratley and Bill Cook were the observers' names. So anyway, they set up about 2,000 feet apart, and they both saw this secondary occultation. They were well outside the path. As you saw in the previous one, the path went over the extreme northwestern Oregon and sort of centrally across Washington State and over British Columbia and Alberta, but it didn't go. They were about 474 kilometers in the sky plane away from the other observers to the Loma Prieta occultation observation. So next slide. This just talks about the astrometry. Then the secondary occultation was about a little less than a second, simultaneously recorded by Jerry Ratley and Bill Cook at sites 2,000 feet apart. And I just mentioned the distance. The photoelectrically determined magnitude drop was about 1.2 for this occultation, and visual observers of the main occultation felt that the color change which occurred when the orange spectral type K star disappeared, leaving the relatively bluish asteroid visible, was more remarkable than the light intensity change. Ratley and Cook reported the same phenomenon before they knew of the other observations. They reported that, that there was this color change that was quite remarkable, and but they told that, sent that to me before we had the others. Lick Observatory was only a few kilometers from Jerry Ratley and Cook's path, and Arnold Klemala and Ron Stone recorded the variations in a photoelectric record which showed nothing using a 24-inch reflector, but it's possible nothing did happen there since the estimated chord length at Loma Prieta was only about 7 kilometers, and if the center of the roughly circular object passed only a little bit to their west, there would be no event at Lick telescope. Anyway, this just talks other events. And next slide. This just shows the decamp shape model fitted to the observations. There's a pretty good fit. Now this is just a single reappearance observation, I think, or disappearance. I got just one event, but not the other. But 4 of these chords were actually photoelectric, so there's many at observatories. It was just lucky that the path crossed 4 observatories, there. But the confirming Ratley-Cook secondary occultation remained a curiosity for many years. Brian Marsden and others wanted more than visual data. They remained unconvinced. To this day, their observations are not included in the asteroid occultation database, although we have many other observations of occultations by asteroidal satellites, mainly made with video in this century, are in the database. But the French, browbeat me, and I sent them, the Cook and Ratley's timings, so they have them, and we're able to work with them. So next slide. But of course that's much later. I mean, I'm going in sort of chronological order here. Then it was over 10 years before the next occultation by Kleopatra was observed with more than one chord. So I just show the ones with more than one chord here. This was one that I observed with video here. With portable equipment that we took up to New Jersey. Klemala's updated path passed just north of New York City, which we were trying to get into that path in the Hudson Valley, but Wayne Moore and I tried to go there, but our departure from Greenbelt was delayed and we ran into clouds when we approached Newark, New Jersey, so we observed from the Pine Barrens south of there, although we thought we were south of the path. We were south of the predicted path, but the path shifted south, to into where we were. So the That's right. That's right. Part of the delay was on his account to save his life, but that's another story. But the northernmost cord was Sam Storch on Long Island, and the southernmost one was in Greenbelt, Maryland, actually at the Goddard Observatory by Jeff Gerber. So this is a New Jersey-sized asteroid, and the shadow path went squarely over New Jersey. But you can see that we did confirm the extreme shape of the asteroid being about 4 times as long as it is wide. So there's no other asteroid really that extreme, especially this size, a large one like this. Next slide. So we were interested in other events. There was one observed in South America in 2003, so you had to wait another 10 years in these early days before we started getting, so now we start getting Hipparchus results in. But these were just visual observations made by 3 relatively inexperienced observers. But in this time frame in 2000, JPL Steve Ostro reported the radar determined dog bone shape. So instead of just being some amorphous elongated thing, we now had an idea that the shape was really unusual. The next slide shows a 2008 elliptical fit. There were just 2 observations. This was Scotty Degenhardt and I flew to Fort Nelson in northeastern British Columbia, so quite a long trip into a quite remote area. We set up along the Alcan Highway, to observe this occultation. Worried about bears, so we had pepper spray with us, but nothing came along. Except I coughed for 15 minutes after testing it. But anyway, 7.7 magnitude star with mighty minis. It was one of Scotty's largest deployments. I think he set out nearly 20 stations, all with a miss due to a huge south shift. See, he set up to the north and I set up to the south of Fort Nelson, and but the path shifted way to the south, and only my 2 southernmost stations actually recorded the occultation. I wasn't nearly as adept as Scotty. I only got out about 5 stations, and one of them I had trouble finding afterwards. But anyway, I got just the 2 chords then, and a couple of misses. Next slide. This in 2008 September. Let's see. Oh, I didn't update the title. Okay, it's 2009, December 24th. So this is just Christmas Eve. Scotty Degenhardt had much better luck. This time the path shifted over him and left us high and dry. So again, we had done a split across southern Arizona, so he recorded 8 positives here, and there were other observers in the Phoenix area who also got it. But Joan, William, and I set up nearly as many stations to the west of the predicted center, and they all had no occultation. And I haven't checked those recordings though to see if there was an occultation by a satellite. It's still a to-do on my to-do list for all these years. But this seemed to show more of a contact binary model with 2 end-to-end ellipsoids rather than the radar dog bone. So it wasn't certain, there's some of the adaptive optics observations that were coming out seem to favor this sort of a model rather than the dog bone shape. So we were starting to doubt, that there might be some problem with the radar. We weren't sure. But the next slide. Then in 2010, this 2009 was a very good apparition for Kleopatra, and they used adaptive optics at Keck to make a lot of observations. And you can see that these show on the left in the red is the adaptive optics images, and on the right is in the black is the dog bone shape model. And you can see they really match the observations pretty well. So So this next slide. But also with the adaptive optics observations, they discovered 2 satellites, and this one's sort of overexposed and showing the satellites better in that view. And so they made lots of observations and were able to determine orbits of these satellites. So the next slide shows finally after 30 years, Ratley and Cook's 1980 observations are finally confirmed, showed by the green dots that are close enough to one of the satellite orbits. Certainly perturbations in 30 years could cause the small offset from the predicted orbit. So you can see here's the main asteroid, with that you saw in the better, closer view earlier. Um, So anyway, then go on. There have been some other observations, occultations. And this just shows the best observed with 46 chords. This is the best observed occultation by Kleopatra, obtained by Western European observers. And so you can see them all bunched up here, and again showing a bit of the dog bone shape. I don't have a shape model imposed on those observations. There should be one somewhere, but anyway, and so that was the last until this year. Then that was this was just very lucky that it was clear across France and Germany and Switzerland and Italy where the observers were there. Then on April 5th, this is the event that brought Joan and I back home. But now we had John Broughton's paver mounts, although pavers weren't needed for this event since we had it almost all night to set up. So this shows the predicted path of the 10.9 magnitude star, so you couldn't do it with minis, but it was good enough to do it with the 80 millimeter scopes, and we also set up a few of the maxis for it too. Next slide. We sort of made an agreement here that Roger Venable would set up his stations south of the predicted center line, so then we could set up to the north where we wouldn't have quite as long a drive from Maryland. So we started in central South Carolina and then set up the 9 stations shown in Occult Watcher, and we did set up and ran all of those stations. Station 9, just north of the predicted center line, we had a miss, and so it's, oh darn, so I guess Roger got it, and we had all this effort for nothing. But as we picked up stations on the way north, we saw that they were positive, and we ended up recording the 1 miss and then 6 positives at these stations here. But unfortunately, we lost the observations at the 2 northernmost stations because of a loose cord input to the camcorder. The schedule recordings all worked on them, but the other was a Mina DVR-10. The battery pack went flat, died before the event. But we said, those stations we thought were the least important because they were beyond the 1 sigma line. Turned out they were the most important. Next slide. This just shows the shape model then fit to the chords, and these are all our chords here. These are Roger's. This was our chord here at Darien, Georgia, and this chord. And the interesting thing was that Art Olson up in Illinois had 2 occultations of the star, and our station number 3 was just a little bit south of him, and there's definitely no event, no reappearance here, so there was confirming a bit of a notch there. It would have really been nice to have our other 2 chords up here, but unfortunately we didn't get them. But this is where the predictions would be. We very look forward to Gaia data to improve the path predictions, so that Roger doesn't lose out on this effort, and we don't have to spread out twice as far as we could have spread out half. If we knew the path was up here, it would have been much better.
Spacing. Notice how evenly spaced they are. I really try to do that.
Yeah.
That's a good idea to do that, but unfortunately it didn't all work.
Right. And Occult Watcher is a beautiful tool to do that. And these are kind of widely spaced because of savanna and just the way there just wasn't any, place where you could get a good site. But yeah, it's and I think that's the end. Uh,
Yes.
yeah. So we want to get to the eclipse talk unless there are any quick questions.